All right, it's 7:30. We're just going to jump in so as not to waste a lot of time. And today's Insta Live interview is all about the relationships between uh, parents and of adult children, parents and their adult children. So the reason why we're introducing my mom again is because she is the parent of 5 adult children, and also she's a catechist. So she is going to give us a little bit of the church's perspective as well. And we're sort of trying to look into the Indian Catholic situation and condition and maybe struggles that people face. So we're just going to start. The first question that I have for my mom is not as a mother as much as a catechist, and maybe also as someone who has, seen and worked with other Indian families. What does the church say about relationships between parents and their adult children? And do you think that Indian Catholics know this, understand this, live this out? So anything you want to give us about that?
Yeah, so this answer is a little bit long. Please bear with me. We find what the church teaches us in the Catechism and in the section on commandments, and specifically about the fourth commandment, right? So most of us know the fourth commandment. I mean, many of us will know that it says, honor your father and mother. So we just assume that it's about children. It's something to tell children to do. Whereas we are lucky that the church explains the whole, what God's plan is for the whole family. So we look at it, not just children should honor their parents, but the church clarifies all the relationships and what God expects of us. So I want to just mention three points. There are so many, and would be wonderful to actually read it. So one thing is, as parents, this is very basic. Our main goal for our children. What is our main goal, or what is our duty towards our children? Maybe it's to lead them to heaven. Okay, so we must care for them physically and culture and everything. We have to look after the whole person. But finally, I think other parents will also agree with this, that we want them to be in heaven. Yeah. So this is recently on Mother's Day. I got this song from Celine Dion, which says, "Every mother's prayer, lead them to a place, lead them by your grace, let them see the light." So that's the first point, and the Catechism says this is what our main thing is, to educate them in the faith. Secondly, something which we may not have thought of is all members of the family are equal in dignity. Okay, so sometimes we don't think about it very clearly. We know it, but we don't think about it. And it says, the Catechism says, we should respect each other. Children should respect parents, that we know. But parents should also respect children as children of God, and as human persons. So this may slip our minds sometimes, it's just my child. And we forget that they are actually children of God and human persons. And the third point, this was a little bit of a one which might cause some questions. It's about obedience. Okay, so we all know that children should obey their parents, and it's a very beautiful thing. But I think we have to look at it as we look at Jesus. No, so obedience has to come from the heart, and it should be willing, and it should come from a place of gratitude. That's what the church says. We are obedient, and because of our gratitude towards our parents, they have given us life. If nothing else, they've given us life, right? But now the church says there are some limits to this obedience which a child has to give to his or her parents. So I'll just tell you the three things, okay? We are not expected to obey our parents if they tell us to do something that goes against our conscience. So I cannot, if your mom or dad tells you, now just go and pay a bribe to that policeman, and you know that you shouldn't be doing it. You should not obey. Okay, so you obey God first, in other words. The other one is if their order is not for our good and for the good of the family. So, as a parent, I cannot just tell my child, I'm your dad, so you just climb up that palm tree. I'm telling you, you have to obey your parents. That's what the commandment says. No. So, it has to be something that is for my good or for the good of the family.
Not just a random dictatorship.
Yeah, so God has given this role, but it's not just, anything. And the third one, which many people in India may not have realized, is that we are not supposed to obey our parents when we have attained adulthood or independence. That means we are no longer dependent on our parents and we are adults. And this is the time where we don't have, we must respect them, we must love them, we care for them. They spell out all that, but obedience is not expected of us. And this is good for both parents and children to realize. In fact, parents are asked to educate their children in the use of their freedom and the use of their reason. So they have to train them to make their own decisions. It's not like I'm always telling you what to do. Okay? And the church says, I would like to read this out, that children have the right and duty to choose their own profession and their own state of life and their own spouse. Okay, so parents should be careful not to exert pressure on their children, especially with regard to career or spouse. Okay, so this may sound very shocking, but I believe that when God tells us certain things, all these commandments are just to give us greater joy and greater freedom and greater peace, and it's for our good. Finally, it's going to help us. So God did the same thing. He also is a father to all of us, and he has also given us freedom. It's not that you just have to obey me. You obey me freely, and uh, yeah, so those are the three things. One is what is our main goal? Second one is about respect, mutual respect. And the third one is obedience, which is a good thing, but it has limits.
Right. So you seem to be talking about like that it's not good in general for parents to push or try to pressure their kids into making decisions. So we're talking especially about adult children
Yeah,
as they're making life choices.
definitely not. Yeah.
So I guess what a lot of parents might say is, I love my child. I can see they're making bad decisions. Like, are you telling me that I shouldn't, like do everything I can to make sure they make a good decision? Or like, how do they, what do you do if you're trying to respect their freedom, but at the same time you love and you care about them and you are worried that they're making the wrong decision?
Uh, so the church in the same para, it says parents can and should advise their children, even when they are adults, and that the children should seek their advice. Yeah, so that is something that we should do. So we don't just put our hands up and say, you do, it's your life, you do whatever you want. But we need to talk to them maybe and ask them, are you willing to talk about it? And can you tell me your reasons for choosing this profession? But be careful not to put pressure on, say, uh, like let them be free in choosing, because finally they know their own heart and they've got to stand up. They have to take responsibility for their life.
Yeah, I think that I remember reading somewhere that parents, um, their whole goal, like right from the beginning, if they're being good parents, is teaching their children so their children start off being completely dependent on them. And your whole job as a parent is to teach your children not to be dependent on you. But I think that's hard because I think in India, you feel like you want your kids to be dependent because then I guess it makes you feel like
Mm.
you're important or to them
Mm.
and that you have this
It's
major role in
about
their
you
lives.
then. It's not about them, right?
Maybe, yeah.
Mm.
So what do you think happens when, and this is very typical, when parents don't allow their kids that freedom or insist on their way, either in the choice of spouse or in career, and they use all of their parental influence and maybe even money, and they threaten to cut them off,
Emotional.
emotional blackmail, whatever, all of that stuff, just to help the child to make the decision that they want. What are the effects of that?
Yeah, so basically, if you're bringing up your child all their life to just obey you in everything, you are they won't be fully developed. In other words, they will be like birds with clipped wings. A bird with clipped wings will not cannot fly, and that's what you're doing to your child. And they cannot really do make any major decision. They cannot even love God, because you think that you have to force them into God's hands, or you know. Secondly, I feel a parent who feels I have to be God, it's a big stress on you, because you can't be God, first of all, and then you're all the time worried. You're all the time. But if you know that, okay, my child it's his or her responsibility to make the right decisions, you have more peace.
Mm-hmm.
And one bad effect of parents controlling the child's life is that they can even ruin the child's life. You can actually ruin their lives by pushing them somewhere where they're not supposed to go. Like, you might push them into a career and they're not really made for it, because you feel they should be a doctor, they should be this, or should be that. Or
Yeah.
even with marriage. In fact, especially where mother-son relationship is, I found many marriages have been destroyed, because the mother is trying to still control her son, or still possessive, and
Yeah.
wanting to say everything about everything. And the son, unfortunately, doesn't realize that he doesn't have to listen. He shouldn't be listening.
Right,
He
because it's
should be
been so
making his own
ingrained.
decision with his wife.
It's
Yeah.
been so ingrained that obeying your parents is the highest good, almost as if it's the same as obeying God. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that's not, first of all, respect and obey is not the same thing. You can still honor and respect your parents
Yes.
while disagreeing
We
with
must
them.
always respect. Yeah.
So I
So
guess,
God's ways are better than our ways.
mm. So, as a parent now, I'm sure there have been times where you might have wanted to maybe where you've seen your children making a bad decision and you've wanted to perhaps have more of a role. You wish that they would listen to you. So, what helps you to perhaps to let go or to um, yeah, I think it's very normal to feel very anxious and upset and angry when your kids go on a different path. So, what helps you in those cases? What would you advise parents in those situations?
Yeah. So as I said, we talk to them, right? We need to speak, and but in a free way. And it also helps me to remember that finally they belong to God, and it's not that I am I am responsible for every action they take. So I can always pray for them, and leave them in the hands of God, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, leave them free. It helps me to know that God is there, and He always reassures me. Suppose I'm feeling anxious, and I turn to Him. As we spoke in the last thing, you read the Word of God, and He's very faithful in that He'll answer you. He knows what's in your heart, and He tells you, "I will take care of it."
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's you have to be able to have, if you don't have that faith in God, then I guess that makes it so much harder because then you feel
Mm.
like it's all on me. I have to fix my
Yeah,
child, make sure they're happy.
it's no
I have to
wonder. Yeah,
take,
many parents are so stressed, and it's because of this. Like, it's all up to me. I
yeah,
somehow have to make everything work.
yeah, yeah. I think something that's also helpful is for your child not to become your idol in a way,
Mm.
where you don't have anything else. Your whole focus and your happiness,
Yes.
everything comes from that child. So having
Mm.
also asking God what your for an adult, parents to to have other purposes in life or other missions as
Yeah.
well, or other hobbies, different things that their hearts and minds are also involved with, to know that your whole identity is also not wrapped up only in
Mm.
being a parent, that you yourself
Yeah.
are a person also
In
separate.
fact, my first vocation is to serve God, right? My first vocation is to serve God, and then it is to love my husband, and then it is to love. This is what I learned. And then it is to care for my children. So I shouldn't put the children before everything else. No? Jesus said, no, unless if anyone loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So we put things in the right perspective.
Now, this is slightly off topic because it's connected a bit with children living at home still, but perhaps even as either children or teenagers. Um, Somebody asked this question. They said sometimes in this idea of parental authority at home and a child's duty to obey and respect their parents, what often happens is the parent, in the name of discipline, might beat the child or abuse them or humiliate them, or and the child thinks, especially I guess good Indian children or Catholic, sometimes Catholic children think that, well, that's, that's part of what it means to be obedient to your parent, and it's their right as a parent to do this. And so is that ever okay? Like, what, is there anything that you would have to say to either the parent or the child in that situation?
So anything that takes away the dignity, remember what I said first, what the church says is that every child is a human being and I need to respect him. So if I'm doing anything that's not in line with that, so if I'm humiliating the child or if I'm just beating, okay, you ask yourself, this is showing respect. Am I seeing that person as a child of God? So just as you would do to anybody else, you have to respect your child as a child of God. So obviously, any kind of discipline that takes away from that, you're actually uh, you're working against God, because God said love, respect, yeah, and even saying stuff which is going to destroy your child. That's in the fifth commandment. It goes against the fifth commandment according to the church. It says killing doesn't only mean you shall not kill, also means destroying the person's self-worth, or saying things which will pull them down. And I just want to say here that we all want the best for our children, and we all fail. So it's not that anyone is perfect, neither have I been perfect. We have to acknowledge and say, this is wrong. I have failed, I've done something sinful, and I need to ask God's pardon. And I need to also go to the child and say, I'm sorry. What I said was not right, and, or what I did. So it is wrong, and it is something that God helps us also to change.
Yeah.
But we've got to acknowledge. We can't just say, you're my child, so I can do anything to you. And children should not accept it also. A child shouldn't say, you're my father, so you can do anything to me. No.
Yeah, so
They
I
should be
guess,
able to say, or get help. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess
You
so
want to say something?
parents need to know it is possible to, and like it's good to discipline your children with respect. That's a possible thing to do, not in
It
anger
is.
or rage, or that discipline
Yeah.
is not the same as just lashing out. And
Yeah.
children to know that, like, yes, as when I'm at home, when I'm young, like my parents do need to discipline me, but it's still never okay for them to abuse me either physically or emotionally or
Yeah.
verbally.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that if anyone is in that situation, that, and especially repeated abuse, like you need to leave that and maybe seek out help and find somebody
Yes.
that you can even move out of home if it's something that keeps happening. And that's not at
Yeah.
all that is what God wants for you. God wants you to be safe. It's not God's
Yeah.
will that you
God
live with abuse.
also, can I add something, that it is not going against the loving a person. Like, it is not good for your parents to be doing these things, because it's a sinful thing. So it's not that you say, okay, I love my parents, so I shouldn't say anything to anyone. You have to. So loving them means also helping them to stop this thing.
Right. So one of the things that we have found very helpful in our relationship, and I think in general, it's something that Indians find hard to do, but it's so important, is this idea of having tough conversations. So being able to bring up things that need to be brought up. So for perhaps for, and this is with again parents and even with adult children. perhaps something
Mm,
has been happening. There's been some behavior, something that wanted to stop, or it's really not healthy, or vice versa. So for a child, like maybe the way that their parent is treating them, or maybe pushing them in a
mm,
particular way, or something's happening. And what happens typically is, like, I think for kids, like, we feel like it's disrespectful to ever even hint that your parents are not perfect, or
mm,
to talk to them about stuff like that. And so you just get angry, and there's a lot of stuff going on inside which doesn't get expressed,
mm,
or maybe it gets expressed in a angry way, or you're just like screaming at them, or running away from them, or just trying to get away from your parents. And for parents, maybe they either just keep nagging or yelling, or so. Is there any healthier way to have these conversations? Is there anything that would help smooth the process both for parents and for their children to have maybe not super pleasant conversations about tough
mm.
topics?
Yeah, actually, Susie is an expert at this because she's the one who used to say, "Can we talk about something?" And so we would all sit down on the bed and talk. Very often, she was the one who initiated, and it was really helpful for us. Uh, I was thinking about it, and I said, even Mother Mary confronted Jesus. If you remember at the temple, when 3 days they've been searching for him, and finally they find he's safe and sound, sitting and talking to the. And she said, "Son, why did you do this to us? We were so anxious." She shared what they were feeling, and she gave him a chance to answer also. And he said, "This is what I was supposed to do, my father's, whatever it is." So there was a confrontation, and there was a good ending to it where he went back. And although it says in the Bible, they didn't fully understand. So it's not that the confrontation is going to just make everything fine and we are okay. They're still, they were puzzled. They didn't understand what he meant by that. But still, finally, because they had spoken, it cleared the air. So yeah, so it is difficult in India. I think we are not used to saying stuff openly, and we just bury a lot of stuff, and that's not healthy because our relationship does suffer. So it's good to do it, and we should try. I'll give you just uh, four four points, okay, hints for when you're confronting. Because if you confront and you just yell at each other and do everything wrong, it ends up worse than before. So you have to do it right also. So some people call it care fronting. Okay, so you do it in a good way. So, okay, POGS. I hope it doesn't mean anything in modern language.
I
Okay,
don't.
so POGS. So P is be positive. Okay, so it is very helpful to begin by saying something, uh, what's it called, positive about the person, affirming them. So I will say, Susanna, I know that you're always trying to do what is right, and I really appreciate this. And yesterday you helped me with that. And then I can say, so one of my priest friends told me, Jackie, if you only make withdrawals and you don't make deposits, your child will become bankrupt. So you can't just keep taking away. You've got to say what is good also.
And also do it
And
up
there is good.
from the actual confrontation, because sometimes,
Yeah.
like when someone says something nice to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's coming next?
Yeah. So it should be a habit. But when you're having the confrontation, doesn't matter if it sounds artificial, but you start by saying the positive. Okay. So P. Then O is share what you feel, be open. O is for open. So be open and be honest. Just say what is the issue and all. Don't beat around the bush. Say this is what I was feeling. This is what I wanted to talk about. But open also means listening. So you are open to what the other person has to say, whether it's the parent or the child, and open also to admit your fault. Okay, so if there is any, you don't have to say, yeah, it's my fault. But if there is, yeah, I think I shouldn't have spoken to you in front of your friends. And I'm sorry for that. So that's open. So positive, open, then gentle. G is for gentle. So uh, be careful not to hurt that person as far as possible. Sometimes you do get hurt, The person does get hurt, but you try your best to speak it in words and in a way that is kind. And the last one is S, which is important. Be specific. Please don't. Someone says, don't be historical. Don't bring back all the past. Okay, talk about one situation. Yesterday at this time you did this. Don't say you always do this. Making general, because when you
Or
do you
you
always,
sometimes when you do also like
you are
a huge list of like everything that you know,
just pour it all.
right? So that probably is not the best.
No. So decide beforehand what are you talking about and only talk about that. So don't, because if you start saying you are always this, you're making a big, huge withdrawal, as I said. You're pulling out everything, all the value of that person. So that's important for us too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that we realized as we would go through these sort of conversations is that they're usually not, nobody really enjoys them, as in they're not pleasant, like
No,
they're a bit painful
they
because
can be painful.
yeah, they can be painful because it can sort of bring out your own weaknesses, and you're like, wow, ouch, like, and yet somehow it's good pain, like it's pain that needs to happen in order to be purified, in order to move forward. And if we don't, we're not willing to go through that, we're never going to move forward. We're just going to be stuck in this sort of prison of the same cycles or patterns. And so we found one of the biggest things is just persevering through them, even if you're crying, even if everyone's upset. You know, we've been through that, and we've just seen such beautiful fruit. Like I feel like we've had so much of healing in our relationships, and even they usually say, you know, like adults living with their parents is not never an ideal situation. But I found after we've had those conversations, like I found so much of harmony and peace in our when I came back home to live. So I just want to encourage people, like it's hard, but do it, you know, and be patient even if it doesn't go perfectly the first time. You sometimes have to persevere
Yes.
through those conversations.
Mm.
And I think one thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, but to be honest about your feeling, like don't say like you made me feel this or you did this, but I've been feeling, when you say this, I feel like this. So being vulnerable about how it's hurting you rather than you should have done this, right? You know, you didn't fulfill your responsibilities. So talk about your feelings. All right. So I guess the next question is, again, for you as a mother, this is a little more general. Um, Obviously, not a perfect parent, and nobody starts off being a perfect parent. But if you're willing to learn, I think for most parents, like there are things that they learn. So, is there anything that you would
Yeah.
advise? Just things that you've learned over the years that you do differently now, perhaps than you did when you were younger,
Mm.
which have been helpful
Yeah.
in your relationships with your kids.
Yeah. And this is one thing that even now I have to be careful about. And this is the point I want to give is look at the person and see the good, see them as good. Okay. I think uh, that means refuse to label them even in your mind. Refuse to judge. Say this person is irresponsible or this person is lazy or this, just see the person as good and relate to that. Okay? So that's very important. And I feel that is something I've learned slowly through the years. So just to believe in the goodness, because it is a truth, because God made us good. As I shared last time, God looked at us after creating us and said, "You're very good, not just good." So, and we have to be the mouthpiece of God actually to tell the child that you are good.
Are there
The
any
other
ways
thing is,
the goodness? So leading up from that point, believing in the goodness, is there any way that you were able to um, be that mouthpiece? Is there any little things from our family that you want to share with other parents that
yeah, so one of the things I remember we used to do at our prayer time, when we had prayer time, we used to, quite often it would happen where we would affirm one person at a time. So we'd have a long round. So everybody, what do you have to say about Dada? What do you have to say about Susanna? What do you have to say about Peter? And then everyone would say it. So we learned that, we got into that habit of honoring one another, affirming. Yeah. Bishop Valley made us do it when we celebrated our silver wedding, if you remember. He sat down and said, now uh, each one affirm each other. So it's a habit, yeah. The second thing is, as we already mentioned, talk about things. You know, see, we're not looking for external. We're not looking for just getting people to conform. Our goal is that something has to happen inside. There has to be so. That's why we don't just take the stick and say obey. So we have to be able to talk things over, give the reason, a good reason behind it. You know, why am I asking you not to wear that mini skirt to church? Okay, you know, and you go into the actual reason for it, you know, and say, you know, what happens and what we're doing in church, why are we going there, and what may happen if you're wearing something, you know? So uh, uh, the goal is to help them to take ownership for their lives. Finally, the same thing I said at the beginning, I have to train my children in freedom and reason. So
That's
so
great.
two things: talk and affirm the good, see the good.
So I'm going to share just a little bit from the perspective of an adult child. One of the things I think which was really helpful in just growing up and being able to relate better to my parents was realizing that my parents are not just parents. Like I think sometimes we just see them as mama and dada, but they're not just mama and dada. They are people in their own right who have their own stories, their own struggles, their own past, their own wounds, their own, childhood and upbringing. And sometimes we don't take all of that into account when we look at the person. So I think one of the biggest things is to be able to look at our parents as people who are not perfect and who have their own struggles, and to extend mercy to them, to realize that yes, all parents kill their kids, maybe some worse than others, and yet we're called to forgive and we're called to have mercy on them, to look at them with merciful eyes rather than, wow, you messed me up, or you didn't do this thing which I needed you to do.
Holding on to hurts.
So holding on to those wounds and only looking at them through those eyes. So I think that's very helpful, is just being able to be merciful in your memories even. And finally only God can bring healing to those wounds, or only God can gaps. I've heard that it's only when you become a parent that you realize that you maybe have a little more mercy on your, realize how hard it is to be a parent. But I think that's why we need the Lord, and we need to maybe bring the wounds of the past, even going through sometimes like therapy or healing processes, to ask the Lord to maybe heal those memories that you might have and which are still affecting your relationship now with your parents. The second thing is, make sure that, so like my mom said, that parents are supposed to respect their kids. Kids are also supposed to respect their parents, not just in, it's not, and respect doesn't just mean unquestioning obedience, which I think is again maybe something that's communicated in schools, like, respect your elders, never challenge them on anything. Like, that's not the same thing. But I think respect is being able to affirm again their goodness and your, especially though they're not perfect, there are definitely things that they have done for you, and to be able to not just be aware of them, but to vocalize those things and to tell them. I don't know if we do that often enough, or we're used to, saying like thank you. And like I realized, for us, I realized the sacrifices you've made for us to be, so to be able to speak out those words. If you haven't done that already, to try to speak
Or
and
you
say like,
can
yeah,
or you can write notes, because your mother can keep them and read them
right,
when there's
right,
lockdown, open all the packets and read those notes and feel
absolutely.
good.
I've heard of parents, really treasuring those words, because I think parents do often feel taken for granted. Even in the imperfections, know that, like, we want to feel, we want to know that our kids do acknowledge what we've done. And also, find out what their love language is. Maybe it's also acts of service. If you're living at home with your parents, I think something that can be again responsibilities at home that perhaps you have not yet done, which is again part of growing up. Like, your parents, it's not their job to just somehow look after the whole home and take care of everything that needs to be taken care of, and then, or just to tell you what to do. but to step up and to say, all right, like, how can I take on more of the load at home? I think that would be hugely, a really big thing. The third thing is something that we mentioned before, which is don't avoid those difficult conversations. This is my sort of challenge now for those who are hearing this for the first time. Have those conversations. Ask the Lord for grace. Pray for it to happen. But go talk to your parents about the things that you need to talk about, and things can be better. Like, you don't have to accept that it's always going to be bad. It can be better. And the fourth thing, this is a little more general, but I found something that was very helpful in improving my relationship with my parents, was moving away. So I think if we live our whole lives, just at home, and then for so many, you live your whole life at home and then you get married and you stay at home, and it's a joint family system, and you're still behaving in the same way, relating to your parents the same way you did as a child, which is not a healthy way to relate to your parents. So I think what's helpful is to move away, because you're effective on your parents and on yourself and your own things, the ways that you acted towards your parents, those things to your roommates, and you're like, oh, like when I leave my dirty dishes all, like lying in the sink for like days, like, yeah, my parents used to get frustrated because it's frustrating, or other people do, and you're like, oh, this is why, my parents were mad at me. So it just gives you a little perspective. And for me, going back home, although it was a temptation to fall back into those old ways of patterns of behavior, I think several times I left and I found that I changed dramatically. I think my siblings saw that I had changed. And it helped me definitely relate better to just to be a grown up, not to think of myself as a child or my parents as just people trying to make me do stuff I didn't want to do. So I think consider moving out, maybe moving into a household with other single men or single women, or doing a mission year. Or I know it's not possible for everyone, but pray about it. See if the Lord can open that door. It might help sometimes to move out. All right, so we're trying to actually keep to our time and not go on for a really long time. So we're going to end. I'm going to ask my mom to pray for parents and their adult relationships. We know that God wants something. Oh, sorry. There's one more question. Somebody asked, is there any way to? I don't know if I asked you this. Is there any way that you can? So parents who've been away, or sometimes they've booked abroad, and they come back home and their kids are already adults, and there's no relationship as such between them, and it's hard to like even know how to relate. Is there anything that you would suggest for how do they build that relationship? They're just starting. Um, what can
No, so
help
the
them?
wonderful thing, yeah, the wonderful thing is God is always there. He always gives us a chance. It's not like, okay, I made all these mistakes. I shouldn't have gone. I should have stayed here. But you did your best. You tried. And okay, you made mistakes. But you can always still build up, spend time with your children. My husband keeps saying, we must do whatever we can to be there for our children, to listen to their stories, and we try to do that. And one thing I want to just tell parents is, it's not just your duty and all. Once, when I had 5 children, all under the age of 10, Peter was just 2 months old. A gentleman came up to me and he said, Jackie, God is very grateful to you, elderly gentleman, very grateful to you for looking after his children. So it was so nice to hear that. I said, oh, I thought I was just looking after my children. But I may make mistakes, I may get struggle and all, but actually God is saying, thank you for looking after my children. So that's something for parents to take heart. God is grateful. He sees all your sacrifices. And yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So how can they build that relationship now as their adult children? Is there
Yeah,
anything
so as
that's
I said, spend time with your children. No? Make time and spend time. Listen to them. Share your lives. Share your own, ups and downs. And let them realize, it's never too late. That's what I said. Just keep at it. Try to build. Do all those confrontations and the sorries and the thank yous and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I found something that you did for us, especially in recent years, that has been very helpful, was the just being able to sit down and listen to us, being interested in our stuff. So I think, when parents ask their kids about what's going on with them, and not only, but even just like, how's your heart? I know that's a very American Christian phrase, but how are you? How are you feeling about your life? Like, are you happy? And just listening, not coming in maybe with a lot of advice, but being able to listen to what they're really going through. And there's something so beautiful about that, a place of trust. And I feel that with you all, with my parents. Like, I'm happy to go home because I know I'm not going to be judged, or it's just a place of welcome and acceptance. And so I think that's something that any parent can do, and it's not something we typically do. It's easier to, like, I guess, food and give them food, but to be able to just sit down with them, and to listen to them and ask good questions. So I
Yeah,
think that's something that
I
can help
agree.
build
That's
the
a good thing.
relationship.
But we've learned that only more recently. Before we were just busy doing this and that.
Yeah. Great. So let's end with a prayer. Could you pray for? So
Yeah.
we're going to end with a prayer, but we wanted to ask you guys, is if you're interested, and you have questions, anonymous questions, I assume would be better. You could send them to me, and we're thinking of doing an Insta live just with questions, question and answers. And so if I get enough questions, I'll let you all know, and we'll do another Insta live pretty soon. So feel free to send in your questions to me. All right, let's pray.
Okay, let's. Lord, I thank you for this beautiful institution of families. I thank you that you place so much value on family relationships. I thank you that you yourself uh, came and lived in a family, and you understand all the struggles and the joys, uh, the difficulties that we face in a family. We just ask you, Lord, to send your spirit on us and give us the grace to keep at it, to extend love to each other, to learn from you how to love each other, especially how to forgive and how to listen. And let each of our families, all those who are listening, let each of our family relationships become something deeper, something more life-giving, what you had planned it to be at the very start. We just place ourselves, our relationships, our parents, our children, back into your hands, because we are helpless to change anything, but with you all things are possible. Thank you, Lord. Praise
Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Mother Mary, pray for us, especially the mothers. Amen.
Amen. All right. So thank you guys, and thank you for being with us. And we hope we'll see you next time. Let me know if you have questions.
Bye.